The show today is going to be about climate change surveys and changing lifestyles. And this is interesting because basically what happens is that we take a lot of things and we say, yes, we are for this. So in the situation with climate change, people are sitting back saying, yep, we're for climate change. Yep, we want to do this. Yep, it's absolutely essential we do this because we are destroying the earth. We need to stop doing that. On the worldview, which was just Tuesday, I talked about how the climate change aspect is you know is forcing companies to go to other areas to manufacture goods like garments. And in Bangladesh, a building just fell, killing 1,100 people. And in that was basically people that were manufacturing garments for Europe and for the United States. So it's situations like that that are forcing us to sit back and say, yes, we need to change things, but are we willing to really, honest to goodness, change our lifestyles? So what we're going to do is this is kind of a twofer here. This is the data show for this week, but next week I'm going to also put it on Worldview on Tuesday because I think this gives a perspective from Europe as to and Europe. I'm sorry, but this is going to be a generalization, and I'm sorry for saying this. I'm not sorry for saying it, but there are going to be people that are not going to like this. But basically, Europe, Asia, a lot of countries sit back and they point to the United States and say, you ought to do this, you ought to do this, you ought to do this, you ought to do this. Whereas, are they really doing it in their country at this point in time? And that's where this climate change survey and changing lifestyles is getting to. And the area that I want to talk about, and so we're going to go right to that point here. So, episode's going to be kind of a dual purpose. Also, what we're going to do is talk about how people support climate change, but then they have to change their lifestyle to support it. It's kind of like, well, maybe I won't do that. So the best book that I've seen to approach something like this is called The Prisoner's Dilemmas by William Poundstone. I love William Poundstone's books. They're very, very, very good. Fortune's Formula, Prisoner's Dilemma, um, you know, how to predict everything. It's all kind of different things. It's all kind of different aspects of what William Poundstone does, and it's really, really good. But Prisoner's Dilemma is interesting because Prisoner's Dilemma is this. You have two prisoners, one on each interrogation area. And you tell the prisoners, look, if you give up the other person, then you get to go free. If the other person gives up you, you go to prison for twice the amount of time. If neither of you speak, you're both going to prison for 5 years instead of the 10 years that person would do. So basically what happens, you can cooperate or you can defect. We'd rather you defect and squeal on the other person and tell us what's going on, whatever else. Whoever does first, that's going to get you get out of jail free card. And so there's only two ways that people can. There's only two ways people actually interact: cooperate or defect. I mean, it comes out. There's more to it than that, but basically, it's kind of like that. And during games, people will defect. I mean, it's interesting how that happens. That people will actually give up their partner in a game in order to win the game or to get more points. Perfect example of this is win as much money as you can. Look it up. Win as much money as you can. It was originally done by I think the Department of Defense to talk about cooperative games and that type of thing and how it's really hard to have that cooperation. But basically, and it happens to us all. It happens to us, right? Hey, you ought to do this. You ought to you ought to do this right here, whatever it may be. Take this drug or take this, nutritional elements or do whatever. And then people sit there and say, have you done it? Oh, no, I haven't done it, but I hear it's really good. And it doesn't really suit me, but it's really perfect for you. Yeah. Okay. I'll tell you what, it's the old birthday card, right? Those who, it says, hey, let's get old, you go first, that type of thing. So it's the idea that it's good for you. It's not as good for me. And it really doesn't really doesn't suit me, but it'd be great for you. That's the old deal here. So that's what happens in Europe, especially. They sit there and they say, oh, we have wind farms. Yeah, you have wind farms right now, but France wants to put wind farms outside of right on the border of the Belgium area, and they're screaming bloody murder because it's going to ruin their view of the beach. So I mean, it's like of the ocean, of the North Sea, whatever else. So I mean, it's just the same thing goes on, folks. The same thing goes on, but this data really brings it out very, very well. And I want to make sure that we go on and we make that happen. Just one more story before we move on, and that's the one about U.S. Steel. My father told me this story. Now I think it's apocryphal. I haven't seen anything on it, but it is a good story. You can apply it to whatever company X. But basically what happens is these executives have this breakfast every day, and they have this breakfast, and it's beautiful. It's got it's got silver platters and silver coffee urn and coffee cups for each executive with their name on it and all this stuff. And they still do this, still do it. The company's starting to go down the tubes, but they still have their breakfast every day. All of a sudden, one day they walk in, there's no silver set, there's no silver anything, there's nothing there. And they go, "What's happened?" They said, "Well, the company's gone, it's gone bankrupt." Well, how come we didn't know that? You didn't know it because it didn't affect you. There's an old phrase that I used to use that goes something like this. It's nobody believes that the house is flooding until their ankles get wet. And that's exactly what happens until it starts to affect you. You're still driving around, you're still having all the shirts and the nice things and all these things that you have on you. It suddenly doesn't affect you. Once it does, I mean, look at the people of Ukraine. They were a rich country, they were doing very well, everything was good, people were, they were happy, whatever else. Now the country's in shambles. All of a sudden they understand what it's like to not have things, to have death around you and all these things. The United States, we've never had that situation happen to us. So we don't have any idea what it's like to be invaded. And that's the important part of this whole thing. So perfect example of this is wine and heart disease. This is something that just came up. Now this is Slate, and I realize what's going to happen is people are going to sit there and say, Slate, it's far, whatever, right, left, whatever it is. Bottom line is every media outlet that you can just click on, NPR, CNN, any of those, I'll tell you when it becomes objective is when they get the most clickbait, when they get the most clickbaits, right? They get out there for clicks. That's what they do. And for advertising dollars. So that's what they do. And they do it because that's the culture of which they are in. So that's what they do. So anything that you say, I've brought some stuff up from CNN, I brought some stuff from NBC, brought some stuff up from NPR, I brought all this stuff up. So the bottom line is this: if they have a story, they seem to be objective in doing this, but I've never seen this story anywhere but on Slate. So that's why I brought it up. In 1991, wine was all the rage to battle heart disease, right? Oh boy, oh yes, some experts saying that you shouldn't go one day without having wine in order to battle heart disease, right? Despite studies before 1991, the one mentioned in the article, 1974, that says, no, you shouldn't do that. Who said this in 1991? Well, it was a TV show, and they had the expert on. The expert was a French National Institute of Health alcohol researcher, right? Boom, 1992, wine sales soared 49%, by 49% the following year, 1992, right? Oh, did I mention the Frenchman, right, that was on there? Was also from a winemaking family in Bordeaux, France, right? Certainly no conflict of interest here, right? No, of course not. And that's interesting. So the individual off the cuff remark all of a sudden says, hey, the French are living longer because they put wine on the table. So all of a sudden, we have a wine issue here. So what about now? The World Health Organization, World Heart Federation, Canadian Center for Substance Abuse and Addiction state that, wait for it, no alcohol is just as good as drinking alcohol for heart disease benefit. So here we have it. It's like, wow, basically, although there may be slight correlative correlations about wine drinking and heart disease, there's no causation about both. There's no causation that wine decreases heart disease, because you cannot isolate wine drinking from anything else a person does. You can't just sit there and say, all you're going to do is drink wine. they have other things that they have in their diet and all these other areas. And that's why you can never, ever, ever sit back and say one thing causes this, because it could be a number of issues, right? Unless you have good longitudinal studies in that area. Um, in fact, the article called "The History of Wine and Heart Disease Research a Statistical Mirage." I thought that was so good. I thought that was, Slate did, I mean, a statistical mirage. I'm sorry, Slate. I'm going to use that, but I'll tell you what, I'll give you credit for it. Based on decades of research, millions of patients, right? And goes back to my book, A Data Analyst Walks into a Bar Graph. It's available on Lulu. Pick it up if you want. If it gives a lot of different aspects about silly statistics and risible research, all these different aspects about how you can take research and just make it sound like, oh, this is disaster, when in fact Bayesian comes into play and there's a lot of changes that go along with that. So that is, what it is right now. And again, YouTube has the time traveling dietitian, and absolutely, you need to see that. That is the funniest and most and absolutely pertinent to what's going on today with these research studies. So back to climate change. All right, so I just want to throw that out there to show you, hey, it's it's good for you. Drink the wine. Drink the wine. Yeah, it's good. YouGov published a survey that was later picked up by The Guardian. It's on the reference page. We'll put that at the end. The numbers presented show that from a sample from 7 countries in Europe show an overwhelming support for climate change, right? Anywhere from 60% in Sweden. Now, let me tell you something. Where did that young lady come from that came and lectured the UN on climate change and how it's destroying everything? 60% in Sweden. 60%. You would figure she comes from Sweden. You'd figure there would be 90% all for climate change, right? 60%, one of the lowest percentage for climate change. 81% in Italy. However, the numbers also show that people do not want to change their lifestyle to accommodate the climate change that they support. And it's interesting. I mean, so most are okay with like passive actions like planting trees, using less plastic bags, all that stuff. But it lowers dramatically when driving less comes into play, right? Less than 25%. I'll go into the numbers through the graph that they presented, the Guardian presented and got through YouGov. 25% for Sweden, Germany, UK, Denmark, maybe 30% in France. So, I mean, here we have all these different areas that sit there and say, these different European countries. What is France? I mean, this is maybe 30% in France say, I'll drive less. I mean, wait a minute, let me think. Paris, wasn't it Paris Climate Accords? It was a Paris Climate Accords, wasn't it? Yeah, okay. In November of 2022, France, Spain, and Italy also said that governments should prioritize fighting climate change, according to a France 24 report, which I also have on the reference page. So let's just take a look at this chart, because I think this chart says a lot right here. So here it is. Some lifestyle changes to address climate change lack support. Proportion of people willing to make lifestyle changes to address climate change. So let's take a look at this, right? Oh yeah, only eat fruits and vegetables that are in season. Oh yeah, there we go. Above, a little bit below 50, above 50%. Never buy products made from single-use plastic. Oh yeah, up here, switch to an electric car. Okay, here's Germany. It's way down here, right? And you'll get Sweden. Sweden is like less than 25%. France is down here. France. Wait a minute. Let me go one more time. Wasn't it Paris Climate Accords? It was the Paris Climate Accords. They were the ones. The French were sitting there saying, "Yeah, we're going to do this. France, let's go to Vive la France. We're going to do this stuff. Cut me a break." So all this stuff. I mean, this is data. Now, I'm going to go into, after all this is done and the emotions are all spent, I'm going to show why this is probably not the best collection of data. I mean, you're forced into a situation when you're a researcher to sample. Sampling is good up to a point. Again, read my book. A data analyst walks into a bar graph. I'm telling you that sampling is very, very difficult. It's not always representative of the country population. It's not representative of what the views are, but the sampling is there. So they have to, they have to do whatever they have. So what they did was they sampled the sample size, 2,000, about 2,000 in Great Britain, 1,000 in France, almost 2,000 in Germany, a little above 1,000 in Denmark, 1,000 in Sweden, 1,000 in Spain, 1,000 in Italy. Okay. So this should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so there's your 7 countries. So that's what this is about. But you can see here, cut meat and dairy products out of your diet completely. Not one country, not one was above 25%. Not one. Every single country said, "Oh, no, that's not going to happen." Interesting, right? The United States is doing all this impossible stuff, beyond stuff, blah blah blah, plant-based, whatever, blah 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 blah. Europeans are saying, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. But we should, but we're not. We're not going to do that. And have fewer children than you would otherwise. Have future otherwise like, nope. They're down here. They're not even close to 25%. Only walk, cycle, or use public transport. Yeah. So Great Britain is here. Where's France? France is, they're way down here. Germany, Sweden's over here. Sweden's about, it's not quite 50%. So still lower than 50%. And France is lower than 50%. So, you have this situation where the data doesn't support that climate change somehow or other people are going to support that. Yes, they support it. Oh, yes, we support it. The Soviet Union back in World War II used to say, oh, yes, we support things in principle. We agree in principle. Yeah, principle meant, we're not going to do it, but yeah, we'll do that. So I wanted to show this. This is the sampling and then the percent of people that are currently in the population in each country. And you can see this is percent, folks, percent, 0.003%. So you have to add 2 zeros on here. So it's 0.00003. So this is percentage. And you can see it's not even 0.01%. It's not even 100th of a percent. It's 3,000th of a percent. So this is what Denmark was about one of the highest percentage ones that were sampled because they only have 5 million people. Sweden, look at this, 10 million people, and they were like at 0.09%, which is actually pretty good, almost 0.1 or 0.01. So 1/100th of a percent. United Kingdom, 3,000ths of a percent. So that's basically what, so we're talking about a minuscule amount of people that basically are surveyed speaking for the country. And when the research is published, it's published as if this is the way that Germany thinks. This is the way the UK thinks. This is the way that Spain thinks. This is the way that Sweden thinks. And I don't know if Sweden really wants to take that on. It's to sit there and say, we may want to put that on our next census survey, talk about that. So what are some of the limitations of the study? The main limitation of the study is the sampling. It's just not enough to really gauge a representative perspective from each country. And the research team, God bless them, they went out there, they tried to do whatever they could to make that work. But the bottom line is that it just is not enough sampling, and this is a really hard thing when it comes down to doing surveys. It's very, very, very difficult because there's no way you can really sit back and say, yep, that's representative of our country, unless they did a percentage of the sample and then took a percentage of each of those ages, each of the races, each of the genders, whatever they broke down, because they broke it down to gender, age, race, and education, and broke that down and then compared it to, you can do that with a chi-square, goodness of fit, and you can compare it to the actual population and see if that's representative of the actual population. There's nowhere in that study that I see that that's done. It just says weighted. That's what it means. That's what it says. So it's like, I don't know exactly what that means. So there's it's weighted, I think, because it's a percentage aspect. So they had to go and figure out something with the census. If they weighted it based on the age and the gender and whatever else, then it probably is closer to the actual representation of the representation of the country. And again, this is addressed and detailed in my book. So I just want to make sure that we understand, this is the book, and it's something that you can take a look at. You can here's the Amazon.com. You can do it that way. There's a lot of things. It's called Data Analyst Walks into a Bar Graph. And it's this right here. So if you put that in there, it will go ahead and it will put it into the it'll do a search on lulu.com, whatever else. You'll be able to make that work, and you'll be able to find the book. And so far, I'm getting pretty good reviews, so I'm happy about that. Thank goodness. So that's what's going on here. So the YouGov also did a survey in the U.S. back in 2022 in the summer. Again, completely completely online, weighted on demographic specifics. But we're talking about the sample was 1,500 out of 200 million adults, 340 million total people. I'm thinking like 200 million adults. It's a guess based on some look at the census data. But you can take a look, and it all depends on ages and things like that, what's going on there. So why are studies not predictors? And here's why. Studies are a snapshot in time. That's it. They're based on limited number of respondents, depending on calculations and formulas that are not necessarily consistent. And I think that's where people just do not, they put this margin of error up at 3%, like, oh, wow, it's 3% on either side. Yeah, that's fine and dandy. But again, you really have to go into statistical power. Statistical power is what really decides whether or not that study has enough sampling to be able to be representative of the population. So next week, what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate through the difference between there was a question that was actually given through the it was a question on using our first question ever, which was really cool. I'm really happy they used it, but it was our email, which I'm going to put right here. And it was a question about, what's the difference between mean absolute deviation, and median absolute deviation. All three of those used almost interchangeably, but they're nowhere near each other. So I'm going to talk about that. We'll demonstrate it next week. We'll use Excel. We'll demonstrate all that, and we'll have you understand what those differences are. So please, take a look at this, and it'll probably be on my YouTube channel, which is Greg Tech channel. The logo up top right-hand corner of this screen, and you can take a look at it. You can actually take a look at it there, probably before Roku TV or Pod TV. So in this case, we're talking about right here in this specific instance for the data show. The sampling is the main point of concern. No matter how well representation is done, there's still going to be questions about the veracity of the studies. And these are the different references. You can take a look at them, the one from The Guardian, The Slate, and France 24. And you can take a look at what we talked about in the way of data. You can take a look at the YouGov.com, and you can take a look and see what the different aspects of what YouGov had. So I think it's really interesting because, The Guardian even said, and The Guardian, is considered by many to be objective, says, many Europeans want climate change, but less so if it changes their lifestyle, according to the poll. It's almost like saying, according to my opinion. So that's pretty much it. The idea behind this whole thing was to make sure that we took a look at the study, we understood the study, how it affected in a world perspective and how these things happen, but also to kind of point out that the Europeans, and I get this, they've been around for a long time. The Europeans sit back and they have a lot of experience, and they sit back and they go, the United States is, at times, isolationist, and they don't want to do the things to be able to make life good and all that. There's three countries three countries in the world that have the most population. The first one is China. The second one is India. And the third country in the world for population is the United States. So, I mean, a lot of people do not understand that. It's like, really, we're the third? Yes, the third. Canada has, you know, they have as many people as I think we have in 3 states. I mean, it's the they just, a lot of people say, oh, we have, there's a lot more, they have a lot of geographic area, but they don't have that amount of people. The same thing with Russia. And everyone thinks, oh, Russia has a lot of people. No, they don't. A lot of geographic area, but they don't have a lot of people. So that's what you have to do. You have to do density analysis to figure out exactly what country we're talking about and how much area they have, how much industry they have, manufacturing, all those things. So it's interesting to take a look at. So we'll discuss that on the worldview, which will come up next week, next Tuesday. So on that note, I think it's very important to understand where this data comes from and what to do with it once you get it, and to take a look at it. And in this case, you take a look at it from a worldview, right? You take a look at it from not just our perspective, but an entire world perspective. And that isn't an entire world. It's only 7 countries in Europe, right? There's a lot more than 7 countries in Europe. But those are the 7 countries. And if I'm not mistaken, I think every one of them is a NATO country, but I'm not sure. So on that note, that pretty much finishes this session of the Data Show. I would like to say thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, at one point I put up the email. It also comes up on the end screen. Take a look at it, and please, please, please send us an email. If somebody did, we're going to address it. We're going to address it right away. We try to address those questions as quickly as possible. Until next time, remember, have a great week, day, month, year.